All right, we next want to turn to pragmatism's implications for educational practice. And there are many significant ways in which educational practice changes to the extent that one takes pragmatic philosophy to be the guiding set of principles. What I want to do is take up four sets of issues, the curriculum in general, then secondarily focusing on three particular elements of the curriculum and show how pragmatic philosophy leads to a distinctive approach there. Then talk about the student participation in these processes, emphasizing group dynamics rather than individuality. And then finally, the role of the teacher as well. And in all four of these points, I've singled them out because the way pragmatism approaches these issues is in marked contrast to the other two philosophies we've looked at, idealism and realism, so it gives us a good opportunity for comparison and contrast. All right, first, the curriculum in general. What is distinctive about pragmatism is that it is much more focused on applied issues in education and tends to de-emphasize theoretical and abstract approaches to education. And then secondarily, that it is one of the leading philosophies pushing for an interdisciplinary approach to education as opposed to a more traditional carving up of the curriculum into discrete subject matters that may or may not be connected to each other. First, on the issue of applications and the emphasis on the applied. This, of course, comes out of pragmatism's general thrust, where its emphasis on that which works, that which is functional, and so forth. And so the argument here is that when we are constructing our educational mission statement and putting that into practice, we should be emphasizing practicality, the hands-on approach to education rather than a book-centered approach to education. It should be an education that is practical and prepares student for life rather than an education that is theoretical and may or may not have any connections to practical life as a student gets older. And then finally, pragmatists will emphasize that education should be hands-on oriented and less book-centered than traditionally done so, much more emphasizing the applied, less emphasis on the theoretical, and even that might be putting it too weakly. In many cases, pragmatists will like to say that education is not preparation for life, but rather education is a part of life. So we break down the distinction between, rather the traditional distinction between schools as a distant, artificial reality, and then we talk about what happens when we get out into the real world. Pragmatism wants to argue that the student should always be in the real world, and we see education as part and parcel of a life fully lived. So we never make those severances that many educational systems will make. Another way to put it philosophically and a little bit more broadly is in contrast to the other philosophies that we've looked at so far, idealism and realism. One of the things that is characteristic we've seen of idealism as a philosophical system is its duality, that it is not particularly interested in what it takes to be a lower material, or physical world, that its emphasis is on a higher abstract or spiritual world. And so it will then, as an implication when talking about education, talk about knowledge for its own sake, or pure theory, and admire that at the expense of what it will take to be grubby practicality. So one thing then we can cartoonily do with idealism is say that idealism is all theory and very little by way of connections to practicality. When we turn to realism, one of the things that the realists stressed in their differences with the idealists was the necessity for integrating theory with practice. And we can then see the pragmatists as one further evolution on that step. They round out the trilogy, so to speak, by emphasizing the practical, emphasizing the hands-on, and typically having less interest in the theoretical and almost no interest in knowledge for its own sake, as it is sometimes said. So I have on the board here a little graphic that might be helpful here. There's ongoing debate about the nature of the relationship between theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. The idealists emphasize theoretical knowledge at the expense of the practical. The pragmatists emphasize practical knowledge at the expense of the theoretical. And the realists are the ones who want to integrate the two harmoniously, hopefully.